Hello viewers, today's topic is on the series of population and sustainable environment in India. In this program, we are going to learn about the population growth in India, trends in poverty and its environmental effects, environmental challenges, pressure on land, forest resources, land and soil degradation, changing consumption and rising demand for energy, etc. So let's begin. The rapid population growth and economic development in country are degrading the environment through the uncontrolled growth of urbanization and industrialization, expansion and intensification of agriculture, and the destruction of natural habitats. One of the major causes of environmental degradation in India could be attributed to the rapid growth of population, which is adversely affecting the natural resources and environment. The growing population and the environmental deterioration face the challenge of sustainable development without environmental damage. The existence or the absence of favorable natural resources can facilitate or retard the process of economic development. The three fundamental demographic factors of births, deaths, and migration produce changes in population size, composition, distribution, and these changes raise a number of important questions of cause and effect. India will be first most populous country in the world after China, which is going to be the second in 2050. The increase of population has been trending towards alarming situation. India is having 18% of the world's population on a 2.4% of the land area and has a great deal of pressure on all its natural resources. Water shortages, soil exhaustion, deforestation, air and water pollution afflicts many areas. If the world population continues to multiply, the impact on environment could be devastating. Population pressure and rampant urbanization is one of the thumping factors which are ultimately responsible for air pollution. Conveniences of people created by industry are creating a suffocating atmosphere to affect the health of the people. Health is again taken care as a business, which otherwise do not get compensated by cash. This debilitating, unfortunate scenario is observed in countless energy power plants, thermal power plants, cement factories, steel factories, refineries, petrochemicals, and mines, etc., scattered across the globe, particularly evident in third world countries. Rampant incessant population is a curse to living and life. Science has become a necessary evil and a modern science does not allow people to ignore, yet it harms slowly as much as it comforts. How do we maintain the quality of climate is the issue that haunts thinkers. Pollution pressure is a menace to good health. As the 21st century begins, growing number of people and rising levels of consumption per capita are depleting natural resources and degrading the environment. The poverty environmental damage nexus in India must be seen in the context of population growth as well. The pressures on the environment intensify every day as the population grows. The rapid increase of human numbers combined with desperate poverty and rising levels of consumption are depleting natural resources on which livelihood of present and future generations depend. Poverty is amongst the consequences of population growth, and its lifestyle play a major role in depleting environment, either its fuels demands for cooking or for earning livelihood for the survival. The unequal distribution of resources and limited opportunity cause the push and the pull factor for people living below poverty line. That in turn overburden the population density in urban areas and environment get manipulated by many folds. Consequently, urban slums are developed in urban areas. The growing trends of population and consequently demand for food, energy and housing have considerably altered land use practices and severely degraded India's forest vis-a-vis environment also. The growing population put immense pressure on land extensification at cost of forests and grazing lands because the demand of food could not increase substantially to population. Thus, Horizontal extension of land has fewer scopes and relies mostly on vertical improvement that is supported by technical development in the field of agriculture. For example, the high-yielding variety seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and agricultural implements. All these practices are causing degradation and depletion of environment with multiplying ratio. The relationship between population growth, resource depletion, and environmental degradation has been a matter of debate for decades. The argument has been between those who view population numbers per se as the main culprit in increasing pressure on the environment and those who place more blame on economic development, non-sustainable agriculture, and industrial practices and excessive and wasteful consumption. In fact, both population growth and non-sustainable development are cause for concern in India. Though the relationship is complex, population size and growth tend to expand and accelerate these human impacts on environment. What is more concern, the number of population rise will increase to such an extent in future that it will cause overall scarcity for resources. Decades of economic expansion and population growth have degraded its land, air, and water. Now we examine the relationship of man to the environment, and with growing population, poverty, and urbanization, the environment is degrading. Now viewers, let's see the population growth in India. India is the second most populous country in the world after China. Recently, the population of India has crossed the 1 billion mark. According to the census of India in 2011, the population of India was roughly 1200 million. At the time of independence, the country's population was 342 million. The number has multiplied fourfold in around 5 decades. The total population size of India had grown from 361 million in 1951 to around 1200 million in 2011. The population of India increased by 4 times during the period of 1951 to 2011. The increase in population has been due to improvements in health conditions and control of diseases. The density of population has gone up from 117 in 1951 to 312 persons in 2001, and it always shows an increasing trend over the census years in persons per square kilometer. Several push and pull factors are presumed to be operative towards distress out-migration from rural and urban areas. This might be due to the declining resources availability per capita and shrinking economic opportunities in rural areas and better economic opportunities, health and education facilities, etc. in urban areas. Providing opportunities for higher level of human capital development could be the underlying factors for rural out-migration. Now, let's see the trends in poverty and its environmental effects in India. Most of India's poor live in rural areas and are engaged in agriculture. India's poverty reduction through the anti-poverty and employment generation programs, along with overall economic growth planning efforts, has helped to reduce the poverty ratio in the country. Poverty is said to be both the cause and effect of environment degradation. Poorer people who cannot meet their subsistence needs through purchase are forced to use common property resources such as forests for food and fuel, pastures for fodder, and ponds and rivers for water. It also contributes to environmental degradation through over-exploitation of natural resources like land, air, and water. Population pressure-driven over-exploitation of the surface and underground water resources by the poor has resulted into contamination and exhaustion of water resources. Urban population is also using rivers to dispose of untreated sewage and industrial effluent. The result is that health of those dependent on untreated water resources is increasingly at risk. Moreover, degraded environment can accelerate the process of impoverishment, again because the poor depend directly on natural assets. The poverty and rapid population growth are found to coexist and thus seems to reinforce each other. Poverty also affects the demographic characteristics of the population and hinders the transition to slower population growth. Acceleration in poverty alleviation is imperative to break this link between poverty and environment. The deterioration of natural resources and unsafe living condition affects the environment and health of the poor people. Looking at the environmental challenges, population growth and economic development are contributing to many serious environmental problems in India. These include pressure on land soil degradation, forest habitat destruction and loss of biodiversity, changing consumption pattern, rising demand for energy, air pollution, global warming and climate change, and the water scarcity and water pollution. Pressure on land. India faces the most acute pressure on agricultural land. Today, every million hectares of land supports 70% people. 43% of the land is under cultivation, one of the highest in the world. A change in the land utilization patterns implies an increase or decrease in the proportion of area under different land uses at a point in 2 or more time periods. Most of this expansion has taken place at the expense of forest and grazing land. Despite past expansion of the area under cultivation, less agricultural land is available to feed each person in India. The extent of agricultural intensification and extensification, characterized by increase in cropping and irrigation intensity and higher use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides and insecticides. The process of agricultural extensification and intensification is leading to land degradation, overexploitation of underground water resources, increased use of chemical fertilizers leading to eutrophication and water pollution. Agricultural intensification because of increasing cropping intensity, irrigation intensity and excessive use of chemical fertilizers resulting into waterlogging, salinization, alkalization of croplands and eutrophication of water bodies and ill health of oceans and thus reductions in biodiversity. Now, let's cast a look at the land and soil degradation. Direct impacts of agricultural development on the environment arise from farming activities, which contribute to soil erosion, land salination, and loss of nutrients. The spread of green revolution has been accompanied by overexploitation of land and water resources, and use of fertilizers and pesticides have increased manifold. Shifting cultivation has also been an important cause of environmental deterioration. Looking at forest resources, with less than 2% of the world's total forest area, the country supports 18% of its population. The total area under forest was 675.54 thousand square kilometers in 2001, which was 21% of the total geographical area as against the National Forest Policy of 1988 stipulation of a target of 33%. Even within this recorded area, only 416.81 thousand square kilometers, or only 12.68% of the country's total land area, comprises dense forests with a crown density of more than 40%, thus reflecting a qualitative decline of forests in the country. Declining per capita forest land and agricultural land. The population growth has resulted in a downward trend in per capita availability of forest and agricultural land since 1950s. Per capita availability of forests in India is much lower than the world average. Overall, the per capita availability of forest land had oscillated around 0.113 hectare during the 1950s and then has consistently declined. The per capita availability of forest land declined from 0.124 hectares per capita from 1960-61 to 0.071 hectares in 1998-99, a level that is extremely low compared to the world standards. The growth of population is expected to be faster than hoped for improvements in forest cover as well as quality. Now viewers, let's cast a look at the habitat destruction and loss of biodiversity. Protection of Earth's biological diversity is an important goal in its own right. Biodiversity has direct consumptive value in food, agriculture, medicine, industry, etc. It also has the aesthetic and recreational value. The greatest threat to biodiversity is not destruction of plants and animals per se, but rather the destruction of their habitat. India is one of the 12 mega biodiversity countries of the world. From about 70% of the total geographical area surveyed so far, 46,000 plant species and 81,000 animal species, representing about 7% of the world's flora and 6.5% of the world's fauna, have been described. Population growth leads to expanding human settlements and increasing demand for food, fuel, and building materials. Modernization of agriculture also threatens potentially valuable local crops. Biodiversity, the world over, is in peril because the habitats are threatened due to such development programs as creation of reservoirs, mining, forest clearing, laying of communication and transport networks, etc. It is estimated that in the world perspective, slightly over 1,000 animal species and subspecies are threatened, with the extinction rate of 1 per year, while 20,000 flowering plants are thought to be at risk. Viewers, looking at the changing consumption patterns, the economic and industrial development is inevitably accompanied by changing patterns of consumption. The number of registered motor vehicles in India provides one useful indicator of expanding consumption and economic growth. The increasing vehicles in the country, producing more air pollution, fuel consumption, traffic jams, and demands for road construction, often at the cost of agricultural land. The total number of registered vehicles in India has increased from 3 million in 1950-51 to 55 million in 2001-2002. The number of registered two-wheelers rose from just 0.27 million in 1950-51 to more than 385 million in 2000 and 2001. The number of cars, jeeps and taxis also registered an increase from 1.59 million in 1950-51 to 71 million in 2000-2001. The number of registered trucks and buses also registered an increase from 0.82 million in 1950-51 to 2.95 million in 2000-2001 and 0.34 million in 1950-51 to more than 0.63 million in 2000-2001 respectively. The major share is contributed by metropolitan cities in all registered vehicles in the country. In 2020, the population of India will be about 1.3 billion and there will be about 44 motor vehicles for every 1,000 people, making a total of 57 million vehicles. An increase in vehicular population is associated with a number of environmental problems like air pollution and global warming. In most urban areas of India, air pollution has worsened due to the traffic congestion, poor housing, poor sanitation, and drainage and garbage accumulation. The environmental effects of fuels like oil and petroleum products are of growing concern owing to increasing consumption levels. The environmental effects are due to increasing consumption levels of fuels like coal, lignite, oil, and nuclear, etc. The combustion of these fuels in industries has been a major source of pollution. Coal production through open cast mining is one of them. So viewers, in this program, we learnt about the population growth in India, trends in poverty, its environmental effects, environmental challenges, pressure on land, forest resources, land soil degradation, changing consumption and rising demand for energy. Thank you viewers for watching the program.